Here we go.
All
All right. How's everybody doing out there in Webland? This is Tom Campbell with Heartland Connections. And with me right now is Edward David Anderson. And he is going to be performing here at the Creative Commons on Sunday, May 31st at 7 o'clock. And we're real excited to have him. Welcome, Ed.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about where you're from and your personal background?
Sure, yeah. Wife and I live in Bloomington, Illinois. We've been here. I came to Bloomington in the mid-'90s, like 1995, and went to graduate school, and I finished in 97. And a few years later, I met my wife. We got married, and we went and lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and Athens, Georgia for a little while, and then we ended up back in Bloomington. So I've been in Bloomington for 25 years, but left for a very short period of time in the early 2000s. And then my wife and I both originally grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in St. Charles, Illinois, and but ended up meeting down here kind of after a gig, and I realized that she went to high school with my little brother, and and that was 20 years ago, or a little bit longer, I guess, and because our anniversary is just next week, so yeah, so I guess I'm an Illinois guy who's lived a little bit in the Southeast, but mainly my adult life basically in Bloomington, Illinois. Yeah.
Okay. So how long have you been performing? What's your musical background?
Yeah. Honestly, I started, I guess, writing songs. I was like in my early 20s, and when I finished school in DeKalb, Illinois, and in like 1994, I guess, something like that. There was about a year in between grad school. I started playing some gigs at a little local bar, and I realized that I could make a little bit of money and that they would give me free Budweiser. So I kept doing it. And when I was in graduate school, I started a band going, and we got a little record deal, and they bought us a van. So instead of going and pursuing my education further, I got in the van, and I haven't really gotten out of the van since. So that would have been 97 when I started touring full time. So I guess I've been doing it for like a job, for a living, for 23 years, something like that.
Ah, awesome.
Yeah.
So what would you say, whether it's musical or life experiences, that has influenced or informed your music maybe the most?
Yeah. I mean, life experiences really is what I write about, mainly. At a certain point in time, I think I realized that you could write about other things, not necessarily, you didn't have to write everything about yourself. You could make up characters. You can write from different points of view. So I started doing that a little bit, but I think everything sort of comes from life experience for me. Like, I don't think that I could have written the songs that I'm writing now when I was in my early 20s. Gosh, when I listen to myself in my early 20s, I kind of cringe. Not only just from because I didn't really know anything at that point, because I sound like I'm 7 years old singing. But but generally, all the experiences that you go through, and the living and the loving and the losing and the carrying on and all that kind of thing, I think definitely plays into really everything that I write about. Even if I'm writing from someone else's point of view, it's affected by my own. So I definitely am one of those people that had to kind of live a little bit to turn into the writer that I think that I've become, for sure. I mean, when you said before, what we were talking about 23 years, you're like, that's pretty cool. And I think I was kind of like, yeah, but it is pretty cool, and thank you. But I think that I was caught in a thought at that moment that I'm 23 years in, and I would have never expected, like, what's going on right now with this business and the gigs and stuff, to not have any gigs. Like, this gig at Bishop Hill is my only really gig I have going on my calendar right now, which is just so weird and foreign. But it's fine. I mean, we'll get through it, and I think everything's going to be okay. Where everybody's happy and healthy here. The baby's healthy. That's all. Wife is happy. So we're going to be okay. And if I was going to have to pick a time to be quarantined, it would be while I'm, sort of learning how to be a father and enjoying every moment at home with this little 9-month-old. I guess there isn't a better time to be quarantined than right now. So it's that's the silver lining. So
right.
We'll get through it.
Well, so speaking of kind of the situation with the pandemic, can you describe a little bit what your pre-pandemic musician life was like at that time? Maybe the story that kind of helps encapsulate, what your life was like in the music world.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's really interesting. It was a really good year for me last year. Like I was in a band I've been in bands for a long time. And then eventually the band that I was in for the longest was called Backyard Tire Fire. And we had a really good run and we toured all over this country and everything. And it went away, maybe it's almost 10 years ago. And it went in kind of an indefinite hiatus. And I've kind of had to reinvent, I've kind of had to reinvent myself and start being Edward David Anderson and putting out albums on my own and trying to figure out how do I do this on my own. And it's taken me a long time. And last year was definitely the best year I've had. I felt like I had a number of different bands I brought back, Backyard Tire Fire. I have my other band, Black Dirt Revival. I have a Grateful Dead tribute called Alabama Getaway. Is that a Grateful Dead shirt you have on, I think?
Right there.
I've got Alabama Getaway. I've got a duo that I do with my friend Stevie. She plays upright bass. I play a lot of solo gigs. There were a lot of festivals. We had our own festival called Black Dirt Music Festival, which was hugely successful. I produced some albums. It was just a really good year artistically and business-wise. And I felt like this year was going to be like the best one yet,
Right.
So, I think really I was just sort of riding the wave and enjoying the moment. And then, and I put an album out basically on March 14th. So that would have been, the Saturday, I guess.
Right.
Or no, March 13th it came out, and then on the Friday, then I played a gig on the 14th, and then the following weekend, all the venues closed and everything was done. And if you know anything about putting out albums, it's not, that's not what you're timing-wise going for. You want to get out there and play. So I would have been playing gigs, supporting the album, all that kind of thing. So, is one of your kids back there taking around the piano?
Yes,
I love it.
It's piano. Well, with having 6 kids, so we've got 4 of them. One of them is actually just graduated from high school this week.
Yeah, congrats.
The youngest one is 4 and not quite taking them yet. So we got 4 of them that are always. My wife's always the taskmaster of making sure they get their lessons. So
that's great.
So how have you been dealing then with now here you are, like you say, you just released an album, you're planning on really supporting that record here coming up, and now all of a sudden, personally for you, you kind of have the rug pulled out from under you, professionally. So how have you been dealing with life in sort of the shelter in place idea and stuff? Well,
another thing that was tough is that the Backyard Tire Fire shows that we had, some of which were like sold out and everything, and we were really pumped for, have all been either postponed, rescheduled, or put off, and like festivals, dates, and all that stuff. But what I have been able to do is, you can actually see behind me, that's a screen that you put in front of a microphone. I made that homemade out of my wife's pantyhose. They're on the air right now. I've been recording a lot at home here in my little studio, happy place.
Cool.
And we're working on a new Backyard Tire Fire recording. So I've been doing that a lot. And then we've been doing these live streams every Wednesday night at 7:30 Central. I do from the basement or from upstairs, or like this week, I'm going to take the van out on the town and find a place to park and sing songs for an hour somewhere, in Bloomington. And people have been tuning in. So like, that's been really fun. And I've been kind of trying to change it up every week and do different sets of tunes and keep it fresh and, do an album in its entirety or that kind of thing. So the live streams have kind of been not only fun, obviously creatively, because I really feel a big hole, like a void from like not gigging and playing, but people have been really generous and have been throwing money in the virtual tip jar and, keeping us going and stuff, since I'm basically unemployed indefinitely. So this, between the live streams and trying to work on the recording down here, and the baby's now crawling around, so I'm chasing her all over the place.
Yeah.
I got my hands full. I've been keeping busy and creatively, and then just trying to learn how to be a good dad and all that stuff. This is our first kid. We've been married 20 years and we just had our first child. So it's definitely a learn as you go sort of thing.
Probably opens up the door for a lot more writing possibilities,
Oh
right?
yeah, for sure. I've written a bunch of songs about her already and everything, and I've got a couple of children's songs in the works and stuff. I'm gonna try to do a children's album. I
Uh-huh.
need to get enough songs together. I think I've got 2 or 3 right now, so that's another project that I'll be working on at some point. So yeah, for sure, it's definitely hugely inspirational when you start seeing things from that perspective.
Right.
It's pretty incredible. It really is. Yeah.
Well, so that's great. So you've been able to perform online and sort of live stream. You've obviously got some fan support that's there during this time. So what type of advice would you give maybe to some less experienced musicians, some people that don't have a variety of musical experience in their background? They don't have a lot of records out. What advice would you give to them to try to navigate this period of time?
Yeah, I would just try to use it creatively. I think that's the only thing that you can do here, because there's been a couple of days out of this entire thing where I let it sort of get into my head. In fact, I think it was just this last Wednesday where for whatever reason, it just hit me like what I had lost, like the amount of work and then the uncertainty and having a family, like it started getting me like really down. And it wasn't honestly until I played the stream that night and did it and got that kind of creative energy going that I felt better.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that like you can't go down that rabbit hole of just anger or just disappointment or any of that. I think the only thing you can do is try to use it creatively and use the time that you have, if not creatively, constructively. Like for instance, like I'm trying to get some things done down here, but I'm spending a lot more time probably with my daughter and my family than I am anything musically. And I would not have been able to do that if I was working and I was gone and I was sleeping elsewhere and I was doing this, or I was crisscrossing around the Midwest or this or that. So I'm trying to find, the positivity in it and the silver lining. And then I'm also trying to use the time to be creative. And I would recommend that for anybody else who's trying to navigate this. If experience or no experience, I think the only way to kind of get through it is to look for some goodness in it and try to get creative and not let your mind get to that negative place. That's really that would be my biggest advice to anybody who's out there trying to get through this.
All right. Good advice.
Thanks.
So what do you think, when you look into the future here and we kind of get past this pandemic period of time,
Mm-hmm.
what do you see the future for musicians like yourself and maybe music fans as well?
Yeah.
What do you see the world looking like for musicians once we get past this period of time here? Anything different?
Yeah, I think it'll be different. I mean, I think it's gonna. I don't know how it couldn't be. This is just so weird. It's so bizarro. It's like Twilight Zone. There's just no way that you could go through this, and there's like this sort of fear and like. I just think that for a little while, probably attendance will not be what it was. I think some of the bigger festivals and stuff are going to take a hit because the big number of stuff is really going to scare people off, I think. For somebody like myself, though, who I enjoy playing to, 100 cap rooms, I love that kind of stuff, and that's kind of where I thrive. And I think the smaller gigs will come back sooner, where people will be less fearful. Even in a room that maybe holds 100, maybe they'll do like a 50 cap and have people sort of distance themselves and stuff like that. But I think that the smaller rooms are going to come back faster than the bigger ones, which is fine by me because those are the rooms that I generally play. Although I will miss like the big festivals and stuff. Like those were really great gigs, and I have a feeling like some of those, even like our Black Dirt Music Festival, we're going to end up postponing it this year, and that was huge last year for us. I think those kinds of gigs are probably going to be, it's going to take longer for them to come back, but I think the smaller ones will come back. And I think that it may take a little while for attendance to sort of get to where it was, and maybe it doesn't, but I think that people need music, and I know that people need people. So everybody's kind of I think at a place right now where we're, with 9 weeks into this or something like that, people are starting to lose their minds a little bit. I think it's because not only for not seeing live music, but just not being able to interact with people, to give people hugs and look at people in person
Right.
and connect. I think that, and music is such a great facilitator for that. I feel like we'll be back. I think that it'll come back. I think it may take a little bit of time, but I think especially for like smaller things, people are going to want to go see their favorite performers play, and maybe it takes a little bit more time, but I feel like people need people and people need music, so it'll be back at some point. Yeah.
All right. Very cool. Well, so for those folks out there in the audience that might be seeing you for the first time here on this live stream,
Sure.
where can people find more out about you and your music?
Yeah. All social media, obviously. My name is Edward David Anderson. Obviously, I have just Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that. I have a really nice website, edwarddavidanderson.com. That has a bunch of stuff up there as well. You can navigate, and which would give you links to Facebook and to Instagram and all that. So maybe edwarddavidanderson.com would be a good place to start. So.
Oh, all right, good deal.
All
well,
right.
hey, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today, and we're excited about you performing at the Play It Forward virtual concerts, and can't wait to listen to your music. So thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me. I can't wait for the show, man.
All right, I'm going to end this recording here.